This program is made possible by the New York law firm of Zalman and Storman, who specialize in the field of personal injury law. Welcome to Lawline with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Lawline will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now we introduce our guest and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Lawline. The debate goes on as to the best method to choose judges. Those in favor of election of judges feel it's an important part of the democratic process. Those in favor of merit selection feel it is the best way to appoint highly qualified individuals in a nonpartisan way. Today we'll look at both these processes with our guest, Assemblyman Clarence Norman, Brooklyn Democratic County Leader, and Victor Kovner, former Corporation Counsel and the former Chair of the Committee on the Judiciary of the Association of the Bar of the City of New York. Hello, Assemblyman Norman.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, Victor.
Alan.
Assemblyman Norman, tell me, what does a county leader do?
Well, as county leader, in regards to the judiciary, we help put qualified people on the bench. Basically, in Brooklyn, the way we do it, those persons who are interested in becoming judges would reach out to members of our executive committee, to our district leaders, to garner their support, and ultimately gain their support to be nominated at a judicial convention for the Supreme Court. For positions such as civil court, they would seek to get the support of local elected officials to support their candidacies and campaigns to run in given civil court districts. And we have been doing that for a number of years, and we're very proud of the people who have ascended to the bench, many of whom have become very outstanding jurists.
Now, Assemblyman Norman, I am told that it's virtually very difficult and almost impossible to become a judge in some counties without the approval of the county leader. Have you found that to be true?
Well, it's certainly not in Brooklyn, because we've had people who have not had our support, who have run for civil court, for example, against the organization, and have won. They've been able to move forward with
in the Democratic primary.
In the Democratic primary, which basically is tantamount to victory once you win the primary. So the process is open to everyone.
What about other counties?
Well, I can't speak so much for other counties, but I do know that there have been instances, for example, in New York County, where people have run against the organization's candidate or candidates and have prevailed. So the process is open, and I think we need to continue with the electoral process as opposed to changing it so that a handful of persons, many of whom have very little connection with the local community, would be in a position of determining who sits on the benches of our courts in this city and state.
Well, I guess you've opened my next question to merit selection. Victor, how do you feel about merit selection, this small group that Clarence talks about?
Well, I am in favor of merit selection, but first of all, you should know that a majority of the states in this country pick their judges other than by election. And when New York State was first organized, back at the time of the founding fathers and mothers, we did not have election of our judges. We only got election midway in the 19th century, and it has not worked very well, unfortunately, because it means that a limited number of party leaders, and I want to say I have great confidence in the county leader of Kings County, but a limited number of party leaders really do the selection, and they do it with very limited scrutiny. And if you have merit selection, you can have a broad-based panel really investigate people's backgrounds and give to the appointing authority the most outstanding cases. And the appointing authority ought to be the chief elected officials like the governor or the mayor, and that's a fair and democratic system which ensures the best people on the bench.
But Clarence says that's a small group. That's an elite group.
Well, it's hardly
not the people.
But the fact of the matter is that people, when they vote for judges, don't simply vote on party lines, so that no Republicans ever win in Kings County or in indeed any county in this city. It's extremely rare. And those who control, for example, the judicial conventions, all the public gets to do is vote for delegates to the judicial convention, and nobody knows who their delegates to the judicial convention are. They are really just the leaders, and I have to say and the leaders are decent people, and I believe in the democratic process, but they oughtn't be picking
Let's
the
hear
judges.
from the leader on that.
Let me just say, when we talk about merit selection, there seems to be some underlying assumption that the present judiciary, which got there by the electoral process, is not competent. We in New York State have one of the finest judiciaries anywhere in this country. We look at our Court of Appeals, which has been the lead in terms of many major decisions, etc., and those persons basically came from the lower courts. So when we talk about merit selection, we need not think that the present judiciary and those persons who are sitting on the bench have not done an outstanding job and have not been exemplary jurists, which they have. One of the concerns I have when we talk about this notion of merit selection, especially hailing from the African American community, is that as the African American, Latino communities, and communities of color begin to flex their political muscle and can now elect people from their own respective communities, now we want to change the rules of the game. Heretofore, when those communities did not have the type of political clout that they had to elect their own, no one was really talking about merit selection. Now all of a sudden we want to take the power away from the people and give it to the bar associations and give it to the various power potentates within the political process and allow them to make the decision. Is the wrong thing to do, and I'm vehemently opposed to it.
How do you feel about that, Victor?
Well, first of all, in terms of the Court of Appeals, I agree we have a great Court of Appeals in New York, and they're the product of merit selection. Our appellate division judges are chosen by merit selection. Our criminal court judges...
Let's take that one step at a time. The governor chooses the Court of Appeals. The governor chooses who goes to the appellate division. Is that correct?
No, the governor appoints Court of Appeals judges from a limited list of up to 7 names submitted to him by a Commission on Judicial Nominations, which is selected not by the governor, he has some choices, but by a broad group, and the Assembly has representation.
And the appellate division?
And the appellate division, he has, under an executive order, first assigned by Governor Kerry and continued by Governor Cuomo, he has a broad-based nominating commission which gives him a limited number of names from which he designates, so that we have a form of merit selection there, as we do for criminal court and family court. But I'd like to also respond to my friend's observation about minority communities' representation. In fact, statistics show that more minority judges get selected through merit selection than get through election. Indeed, yes, in predominantly majority minority districts, you will have minority judges and they won't have had any serious scrutiny. But through merit selection, minority judges get chosen in significant numbers, and they do better, I submit, and it is in the interest of those who seek to more diversify our bench to advocate merit selection.
The whole process of appointing judges has been a disaster for communities of color. We look at the federal courts, for example. 96 judges appointed during the past 12 years, and I believe only about 7 were members of the African American community or Latino communities of color. So it's not working. We look at the first department when George Bundy Smith's seat.
Okay, that's Bronx and Manhattan.
Manhattan, right. When that seat became vacant, of all the persons whose names were sent up to be considered to fill that particular vacancy, there was not one African American amongst the first batch until there's protestation that process should be done over again. So we see that the process has not worked in favor of helping to really create diversity. I said, if we want to create diversity, let us have, for example, for the Supreme Court, smaller judicial districts, which will allow the delegates to come together, and you can have greater concentrations of minorities within those judicial districts, and they can certainly determine the persons who will go to the bench. Let's not put it into the hands of a few folk. And you talk about the governor, the mayor. What if you have someone other than a Mario Cuomo who's committed to diversity? What if you get some type of conservative governor, conservative mayor who has no commitment to diversity? Then you'll find that the process would be even more flawed, and the communities of color would be forever foreclosed from participating in the process and being represented.
Victor, are you saying that you believe that the election process, that you don't get the best judges from the election process?
I am, but I just...
Oh, you are saying that?
I think we can do better. We get good judges from the election process.
Not the best.
But we can do better. We can do better through merit selection. I'd like to just respond briefly to Clarence's point.
Ultimately on the Court of Appeals.
I know, and they are the best of them who get promoted, which is why we have such an outstanding set of appellate divisions and a Court of Appeals, because merit selection picks the best from among the elected.
But most of them were originally elected.
They were.
That's how they got into the process. So therefore, when they originally elected and proved and demonstrated their qualifications, they were able to ascend to higher positions within the judiciary. So the whole notion that the judiciary is not perhaps as good as it could be, I don't see any evidence to substantiate that.
I wanted to respond to the federal
Go ahead.
points. I agree that the record of Reagan-Bush in recent years in terms of lack of diversity in terms of federal court appointments is outrageous. But their system was not merit selection. Their system was a too political appointment process. And I don't advocate that either. I advocate restricting the power, the appointing power, to a list of names selected by a broad-based panel of persons, a diverse panel of persons, who will give the appointing authority the best candidates. It is shameful, and that federal system has produced the lack of diversity, and we're going to do better, and we're already doing better under President Clinton, but the fact of the matter is that's not merit selection. Merit selection is for the New York Court of Appeals, and a form of it applies to the appellate divisions, and in terms of mayoral appointments, to the credit of Mayor Dinkins and his predecessors, we have a good merit selection system in place.
Weren't you on that committee?
I was on the Mayor's Committee and the Judiciary for many years, and which is when I say there are more minorities appointed through merit selection, I know that because we helped make that possible.
Let's explain to the public. The mayor appoints criminal court judges and family court judges.
Yes.
The governor appoints through the list Court of Appeal judges and appellate division judges.
And the latter from Supreme Court
and
judges.
Court of Claims.
And all the other judges, the civil court judges and the Supreme Court judges, are elected. Is that correct?
That is correct, which I have no problem with that general situation.
So it's a combination of both.
Exactly, a nice hybrid. But I'm saying in regards to the Supreme Court, instead of moving from the electoral process, judicial conventions, I would say that we should have smaller judicial conventions so that you have higher concentrations.
You mean you wouldn't have it countywide as it is now?
I would propose that we split the judicial conventions and make them smaller.
How would you do that? In other words, you split Brooklyn in half, Manhattan in half?
Well, not necessarily only in half. You can make it even smaller, perhaps maybe 6 judicial districts within Brooklyn, so that you get higher concentrations of minorities within those judicial districts, thereby allowing a greater possibility of nomination election of people of color.
Assemblyman
to be more
Norman,
reflective of the city's diversity.
You're the county leader of Kings County,
Yes.
which is probably the largest county in the state of New York. Tell us, how does a civil court judge, or how does anybody actually become a Supreme Court judge? You have to go through this judicial convention. No, it's not really a convention, it's a room full of delegates, isn't it?
Yeah, but the way we do it in Kings County, those persons who have aspirations of moving to the Supreme Court will reach out, touch base with the members of the Executive Committee, and we come together and we determine who we will ask the delegates to support at the Judicial Convention.
I have a
for
question for
nomination.
you. I have a question for you.
Sure.
I understand that judges cannot be political if they're sitting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Now-
However, when they are running for a judicial seat, they are allowed, after they file the appropriate documentation and papers, to attend certain fundraisers and the advancement of their candidacy.
Okay, so at that point, they can at least attend functions.
That is correct.
Can they go to the club meetings? Can they meet the delegates?
They can do that.
Can they politic for
Only
themselves?
to politic for themselves, not for other candidates, and any expenditures they make must be solely on behalf of their respective candidacies.
Because I see it's just a little inconsistent if a judge is sitting for 7, 8 years and has been totally non-political. And then he decides, well, maybe I have a chance for Supreme Court. Now I have to get back into the political process.
Well, it's not so much him or her being involved in the political process per se. It's a matter of touching base with those persons who will have some influence over the process. As we do in any aspect of life, when we're seeking to garner people's support, we outreach to them. And that's what we have people doing who are interested in becoming judges or running for higher office.
Victor, what's your opinion about this judicial conference or convention that each county has to have where a judge, a civil court judge or a criminal court judge or a family court judge that wants to go to the Supreme Court has to go through the political process, the convention in the county, or I guess even a non-judge can go to the convention and
Anyone
become...
is open.
What do you think of that?
I think the judicial convention system is a disgrace. It is a hoax and a fraud upon the public. Nobody knows who their judicial delegates are. And to be told, well, you can vote for them, but the matter of fact, there are very few contests for judicial delegates. And the judicial convention is simply the district leaders sort of expanded slightly. So it is touching base with members of the executive committee who are the district leaders, and they pick. And I have to say, I think they ought to pick the candidates for the assembly and the Congress and the state Senate, but they ought not pick candidates for judge, because that's not the way to get the best judges.
We have to go to a break now, but right after the break, please, I'd like you to respond to that opinion about doing away with judicial conventions. You're watching Lawline. We're talking about merit selection versus the electoral process. Very interesting show. Stay with us.
After dating the guy forever, you think I could tell him anything.
Why is this so hard? I'm really scared.
It takes a lot of guts to tell someone he's too drunk to drive. But you can do it. Just say it. Because if you don't, there may be nothing left to say.
Kevin, I'm gonna drive.
Take the keys, call a cab, take a stand. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
When your employees train with the National Guard and Reserve, they learn to be better team players, better decision makers, and better leaders. It's training that makes them better at serving our country. And better when they come back to work for you.
Bill's back.
Be a hero. Give your employees the freedom to protect ours.
Hello, you're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Today we're talking about the election of judges versus merit selection of judges. Our guests are Assemblyman Clarence Norman, who's the Brooklyn Democratic County leader, and Victor Kovner, former corporation counsel and former chair of the Commission on the Judiciary. Clarence, right before the break, Victor said he felt that the judicial convention that selects judges, lower court judges to become Supreme Court and non-judges to go to Supreme Court was a fraud. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think he's absolutely wrong, despite my great respect for him and his breadth of knowledge. I think on that particular issue, he's woefully incorrect. The whole process of the Judicial Convention democratizes the process of the selection of Supreme Court jurists. What my colleague would recommend would be that we give that authority, that power, to a small group of persons. The question is, how would they be appointed? They'd be appointed by the political potentates who can put their respective friends on these panels and persons who may have curried favor with them, and you put the process into the hands of a small group, probably males who have dominated the society, as opposed to a judicial convention which is more reflective of the cities, the state's diversity, having more women, people of African American descent, Hispanic descent, and the great divergence of populations that abound within our given city and state. And I believe that's where we should keep the power to nominate persons for the Supreme Court. Leave it in the hands of the people. Don't give it to the political potentates who will cut their deals in the back room based upon their own given and select set of criteria.
So
leave it with the people.
You're really saying the election process is more non-political than the selection process, which is really the political
process. Or perhaps just as, but at least we're leaving it in the hands of the people.
Yep.
Leave it with the people and not with the elitist power potentates.
Yes,
you know, the irony is that in advocating that breaking up the judicial conventions into smaller districts, as my colleague does, suggests, he really reflects dissatisfaction with the present system. One of the reasons he's dissatisfied, and I understand it, is that the voting patterns of his own county have wound up electing on a countywide basis, where people vote principally ethnically in primaries. It's hard for minorities and others to make it. So he wants to, he is dissatisfied, as he should be, with the voting patterns, because people don't know about judges. They will vote just ethnically or in party lines in general elections. And that's why it makes sense to have a diverse body, with the appointing authority ultimate appointing authority being in the hands of people who are elected, and we all know who we do vote for governor or for mayor, so that the appointing authority would be, in fact, truly democratically based.
But he says it's a small, elitist group that will appoint Most likely.
The Wall Street lawyers, the members of the Bar Association.
Yeah,
You're not going to get Mrs. Smith from down the corner and around, the neighborhood on those panels.
Well, let me say, I
Okay.
love Mrs. Smith, but I don't know that she necessarily is the best person to sit on
That's-
on the panel
That's my
screening
very-
candidates for
that's my
Supreme
very
Court.
point.
But
Some
but
people
you
take it unto themselves
but you
to say,
can-
we have and possess the reservoir
No,
of
no,
knowledge and
no.
wisdom to determine who should be on the courts. I say there should be diversity in terms of the decision makers. Leave it with the people. Those persons who seek the Supreme Court, they go around to the clubs, they visit the district leaders, people who have a nexus with the community in order to garner that support. And it has worked because we know we have a fine judiciary.
Do you
You
have
can have
any
ethnic. You can have, and we do have ethnic diversity on the Judicial Nominating Commission for the Court of Appeals, and geographic diversity, and diversity in terms of legal backgrounds. It's appropriate, I would submit, to have, at the bare minimum, lawyers review these qualifications. We're looking for not the best citizen to be a judge. We're looking for the best lawyer to apply an independent, skilled
Victor,
job
I-
to
Let me say,
the problem
that
of judging.
those persons who do seek the political party's nominations, it's not as though they just come in off the street. These are persons who also submit themselves to various screening panels. And
Of
they're
the
probably-
Democratic Party.
Of the Democratic Party as well. Most of them go to the Association of Bar, City of New York, the local Bar Association, as in Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bar Association, and they submit themselves to questioning, and in most cases they are found to be qualified. If not, then that's something that the various screening committees set up by the political organization would certainly take into
Do they
consideration.
come before the convention if they're found not qualified by your screening
If
committee?
they're not found qualified by our screening committee, which consists of many prominent lawyers and community folk, they will not be nominated by our...
So how do you answer that, Victor?
I want to tell the vignette of a candidate from Assemblyman Norman's county, who I was chairing the Bar Association's judiciary. We were meeting in Brooklyn. We were seeing all the candidates from Brooklyn. And this candidate, this is several years ago, before you
Before I
were
became
county
county
leader,
leader, okay.
said to me,
No responsibility.
I'm not coming. I'm not coming to the Brooklyn Bar. I'm not coming to the city bar. I don't care what the newspaper editorial said. It doesn't mean anything in my district. I'm just running it. If I spend enough money, I'll win.
With you or without you?
With you or without you. So they weren't even being subjected to outside scrutiny. I'm happy to say that candidate was defeated.
Is that right?
And the other candidate did come, was approved, and I want to commend
the electoral
Assemblyman
process
Norman.
does work.
No, I want to commend Assemblyman
The exception proves the
Norman
rule.
for having the candidates he supports go through a screening process and the Bar Association process. But let me say, they are mostly after the fact process. The real selection is by the parties and
By the party leaders?
by the Democratic Party in the city of New York and by the Republican Party in the suburbs and upstate. And they have very little outside review, and that process really provides inadequate scrutiny, and that's why we need a broad-based
But
group
Are
to
you saying that the
evaluate.
party leaders actually select those people who are going to become judges, and then it's just a rubber stamp at the primary?
In effect, you are. That's a fair statement most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time.
But he agrees with me that the judiciary that we have, notwithstanding the process and whether or not he agrees with it, has been working. We've gotten a fine
Do you
crop
know of any
jurors.
examples
We-
where it has not worked, where someone has taken the bench and was had not met approval?
First, I want to say we have an excellent judiciary, and it's working well on the whole, but it can be better. Now, I was on the Judicial
I understand.
Conduct
Do you
Commission,
know of any
which
examples?
disciplines judges. I served for 14 years.
You were chair, weren't you?
I was chair at the conclusion of my term, and the fact is that of the people we disciplined, and indeed of the ones we removed, more overwhelmingly tended to be elected judges.
Because
Now,
more elected judges sit on the
Well,
bench. But
that's-
I'm quite sure some of the judges who appeared before his committee were also judges who have been appointed.
he
So
is
it
quite
could-
right, but it's not
So
perfect.
that doesn't prove a point.
No, but the weight of the problems comes from the fact that too many people make it to the bench without sufficient scrutiny. The more outside scrutiny you have, the less likelihood that you're going to have a problem on the bench, and the burden of those problems is not by the judge or by the society in dealing with, but by the litigants who are before someone who really may be unqualified for one reason or another.
Clarence, what makes a person qualified to be a judge?
Well, I think he or she certainly must have the legal acumen, the judicial temperament, and I would dare say for the courts of our city that they should certainly have some type of connection, a nexus with the community. I'm not saying they have to be a member of a political club. For example, Priscilla Hall, Priscilla Hall is presently a court of claims judge, does not belong to any political organization, but she went out this past spring and summer and fall, touch base with members of our exec committee, and she received the nomination of the Kings County Democratic Organization at our judicial convention, is now on the ballot for the Supreme Court. No political connections, but she is qualified. And the members of our exec committee
Victor's
support
smiling.
people
We'll
based
find
on
out about that smile.
qualifications.
Why are you smiling?
She's an outstanding judge, and I
Exactly.
commend County Leader Norman in that capacity
Yes.
for naming her. But I will say she was originally selected to the Court of Claims through a merit process, and she ought not have to come to the Kings County Democratic Committee to get to the Supreme Court, in my view. And she'd get to the Supreme Court anyway through a merit process because she's so outstanding. They did the right thing, as they often do. But the system would be significantly improved if you don't place the political parties in the decision-making
my point
role.
is that we, through the electoral process, still do it on merit.
Victor, do you know of any circumstances where they've done the wrong thing?
They have done the wrong thing over the years. I want to say Assemblyman Norman's predecessor's record in this area was not a good one, and
what happened?
And what happened is that he left. He put many people on the bench who were
Are we talking
embarrassments.
about Howard
of the
Golden now?
No, we're talking.
Meade
I'm sorry,
Esposito?
Meade Esposito. Two removed. I was not talking about Borough President Golden, but Meade Esposito's record was particularly poor and is responsible for some of the unfortunate situations where judges have to have been removed, and we don't see that as much, and Assemblyman Norman is doing it a lot better, and he's to be commended for it, and I understand his struggle to reserve that power to the political party system, but I have to say it is on the whole state. He asked what happens when a bad governor. I worry about other county leaders who are not as far-sighted throughout the state, who are insensitive and who place the wrong pressure on people to get judicial nominations.
Let me show you what we've been able to do through the process of empowerment. Now on our exec committee, we have almost 50% people of color, African Americans, Latinos. As such, we're going to be able to do more in terms of diversity of our judiciary in Kings County, because the communities are now electing more of their own, and they're sitting on the executive bodies of our county organization. So we're moving forward very aggressively. We put more African Americans on the Supreme Court over the 3 years that I've been chairman. We put more Latinos on the bench. And I would dare say that this is the process by which we can achieve diversity, as opposed to putting the authority and the power in the hands of a small group of persons who will, here again, be in the back room, cut their own deals, get telephone calls from their friends on Wall Street, friends from the Bar Association, as to who should be advanced, who should be on the bench. Leave it in the hands of the people. That's the democratic way, that's the American way, and I support the present situation and system with a few alterations to even more democratize the process in order to reach the goal of greater diversity.
Assemblyman Norman, let me ask you this. Years back, it was talked about in the newspapers and the media that you could buy a judgeship, that you could donate X number of dollars to the party, and all of a sudden you got a judgeship. What do you know about those practices years ago?
Well, those practices are long gone, and the persons who participated in those practices are probably coming out of jail now. Those days are over. Now, with certain legal constraints in terms of the conduct of candidates for judges in regards to how they expend money. There are very finite circumstances under which they can spend their money, and we don't do it that way.
Victor, in summation, we got a minute to go.
The elective system does not leave it to the people. I trust Clarence.
Quickly?
But I don't want to leave it to the county leaders
Clarence,
and the
in
district
summation?
leaders.
Well, I want to keep it the way it is with some adjustments, and we can improve the system and reach greater diversity, but no merit where the small groups come together and determine who
Assemblyman
sits on our
Clarence
benches.
Norman, County Leader of Kings County, and Victor Kovner, past Corporation Counsel and Head of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you both for appearing on Lawline. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and this was a great show, and thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program is made possible by the New York law firm of Zollman and Schnorman, who specialize in the field of personal injury law, located at 63 Wall Street in New York City.